Hey everyone, buckle up. We're taking a deep dive into how to conquer the fear of driving.
Yeah, driving anxiety, it's a real roadblock for a lot of people.
Definitely. And to help us navigate this, we checked out an episode of the Conquer Your Fears podcast.
Oh, cool. Which episode?
It's called Overcoming the Fear of Driving, hosted by Jack and Emmy.
I've heard good things about that show.
So right off the bat, they emphasized understanding where this fear comes from, getting to the root of it.
Makes sense. You got to know what you're dealing with before you can tackle it.
Exactly. Like they talked about how past trauma can be a major factor. Like imagine being in a car accident.
Yeah, that could definitely leave a lasting impact.
Right. Or even just the thought of potential dangers, all those what ifs.
Oh, those what ifs can be brutal.
Totally. Like, what if I lose control? What if I make a mistake? It can spiral pretty quickly.
It's like your mind is playing out all these worst case scenarios.
And then there's just a lack of confidence, especially for new drivers.
Yeah, I remember when I was first learning to drive. It's a lot to take in.
I know. You're trying to remember all the rules, navigate traffic, handle the car. It's overwhelming.
Totally. And the more overwhelmed you feel, the more anxious you get.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
They also mentioned sensory overload, which makes a lot of sense.
How so?
Think about it. All those cars, all that noise, people everywhere. It's a lot to process, especially if you're already feeling anxious.
That's a good point. It's like your senses are working overtime.
It can be really intense.
So figuring out what your specific triggers are is super helpful.
Right, like is it highways that freak you out? Or maybe merging into traffic?
Exactly. Once you know what those triggers are, you can start to address them head on.
All right, so we've got a better understanding of what causes driving fear. But now the big question is, how do we actually overcome it? Well, Jack and Emmy had some practical tips for preparing to drive that I thought were really helpful.
Oh, I'd love to hear those. What did they suggest?
Well, one thing they emphasized was planning your route in advance.
That's a good one. I always feel better when I know exactly where I'm going.
Me too. It's like taking control of the situation, which can really ease anxiety.
It eliminates that lost and unsure feeling.
Exactly. And they also talked about practicing in low traffic areas first.
Oh, yeah. Start small, build your confidence, then gradually work your way up.
Makes total sense. You don't want to jump right into rush hour traffic on your first solo drive.
No way. Start with those quiet neighborhood streets where you feel more comfortable.
And they had another practical tip. Make sure your car is in tip-top shape.
Oh, that's a good one. I hate it when my car is acting up. It just adds to the stress.
Right. So making sure you have enough gas, your tires are good, all those practical things.
It's about minimizing those extra worries so you can focus on the driving itself.
Totally. It's like checking off those mental boxes before you even get behind the wheel.
And I bet it helps to boost your confidence too, knowing that your car is reliable and ready to go.
Absolutely. When you feel prepared, you feel more in control, and that makes a huge difference.
It sets you up for success from the start, and they talked about relaxation techniques too.
Oh yeah, like deep breathing and mindfulness.
Exactly.
I could see how those could be helpful. Have you ever tried those for anxiety?
Oh, for sure. Especially deep breathing. It really helps to calm your nerves. When you're anxious, your body kind of goes into like fight or flight mode.
Right?
Your heart rate goes up, your muscles tense up, you don't breathe as deeply. But deep breathing, like really focusing on your breath, kind of signals to your body that it's okay to chill out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and mindfulness is kind of similar.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it's all about being present in the moment instead of getting caught up in like what if thoughts.
Oh, I see.
So you focus on your breath, your body, what you can see and hear around you. It's a way to ground yourself and kind of quiet those racing thoughts.
So you're not letting your mind run wild with all those scary possibilities.
Exactly.
Uh,
Okay, so we've got a pre-drive prep down.
All right.
Now, how do we actually start tackling those driving situations that trigger the fear?
That's the million-dollar question. Jack and Emmy talked about this idea of gradual exposure.
Oh, that's a classic technique for overcoming phobias.
Yeah, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, the basic idea is you start with small, manageable steps and gradually increase the challenge as you get more confident.
So instead of jumping right onto the highway, you might start by just driving around your block a few times.
Exactly. And then maybe you venture out to a quieter street than a busier one. The key is to go at your own pace and celebrate those small wins.
I like that. Each successful drive builds your confidence for the next one.
Exactly. And they also suggested bringing a trusted friend or family member along for those early drives.
Oh, that's a good idea. It's like having moral support.
Totally. Having someone there to offer encouragement, maybe help with navigation, can make a huge difference.
It's like having a co-pilot on your journey to conquer this fear.
I like that analogy. Now, what about our mindset going into this? Jack and Emmy talked a lot about shifting our thinking.
Because the way we think about driving definitely affects how we feel about it.
Right. If we're constantly thinking about worst-case scenarios, we're just going to feel more anxious and less confident.
So how do we actually change those negative thought patterns? Is that even possible?
It is, but it takes practice. It's about consciously choosing to focus on the positive.
Like focusing on what you're doing well instead of what you're afraid of.
Exactly. Instead of thinking, what if I crash? Try thinking, I'm getting better at this with each drive.
That's a much more empowering way to look at it.
Right. And they shared a story about a listener named Lisa who had struggled with driving anxiety for years.
Oh, what happened to her?
Well, her breakthrough came when she started focusing on small victories and celebrating her progress.
So she wasn't aiming for perfection, just progress.
Exactly. She started with short drives, gradually increasing the distance, and she really focused on what she was doing well.
It's like she was training her brain to focus on the positive.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a good reminder that overcoming a fear isn't about never feeling scared.
It's more about learning to manage that fear and keep moving forward.
Right, you're going to feel scared sometimes, but you don't let that fear control you.
Her story is really inspiring. It shows that this is possible for anyone.
Absolutely. Now, what about those who might need a little extra support on this journey? Jack, Emmy had some great advice about that too.
Like what?
Well, they talked about the importance of not being afraid to seek professional help.
There's absolutely no shame in that.
Not at all. It's a sign of strength to recognize when you need support and to reach out for it.
So true.
And they specifically mentioned therapists who specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
I've heard of CBT. Can you explain how that works?
Sure. CBT helps you identify those negative thought patterns we were talking about and then challenge them.
Oh.
Like, are those thoughts really true?
Yeah.
Are they helpful? And it also gives you practical tools to reframe those thoughts and develop healthier coping mechanisms for anxiety.
So it's not just about talking about your fears, it's about learning how to actually change the way you think about them.
Exactly. And they also mentioned that there are driving schools specifically geared towards anxious drivers.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. What's different about those schools?
Well, they offer a safe and supportive environment to practice with instructors who are trained to work with people who have driving anxiety.
So they get it. They understand what you're going through.
Yeah, they understand the challenges and they can help you build confidence at a pace that feels comfortable for you.
So it sounds like they really stress finding the right support system,
For sure.
whether it's a friend, a family member, a therapist, a driving instructor.
It makes a big difference having people who get it and can cheer you on along the way.
Totally. Okay, let's recap the key takeaways from our deep dive into conquering driving fear.
Okay, so first, understanding the root of your fear is super important.
Right. Figure out where it's coming from.
Yeah. Is it past trauma, anxiety about potential dangers, lack of confidence, sensory overload? Once you pinpoint the source, you can kind of tailor your approach.
And then there's the practical preparation side of things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Planning your route, practicing in low traffic areas, making sure your car's in good shape. It's all about creating a sense of control.
Right. Taking charge where you can.
And those relaxation techniques, deep breathing mindfulness, can be game changers.
Definitely. Got to manage those nerves.
And gradual exposure is so key.
Start small, celebrate those wins, and gradually work your way up.
And don't underestimate the power of a supportive friend or family member riding shotgun.
It can make the whole experience less intimidating.
Mindset is huge too.
Totally. Challenge those negative thoughts and focus on the progress you're making.
You got this.
And remember, if you need extra support, don't hesitate to reach out.
Therapists, CBT, driving schools for anxious drivers. There are resources out there.
They can provide that guidance and help you build that confidence.
You know what's interesting? Facing a fear like this can actually teach you a lot about yourself.
It's not just about learning to drive, is it?
It's about so much more.
You're learning to manage anxiety, you're building resilience, you're expanding your comfort zone. Those are skills that can help you in all areas of life.
So to all our listeners out there who are on this journey,
You're not alone.
remember, you're not just learning to drive, you're developing a stronger, more capable you.
Yeah,
And that's pretty amazing.
it is. And you know what? Once you conquer this fear,